Welcome to this week's installment of Today and Tomorrow in Scottsdale with Don Henninger. I'm Don. Joining me, as always, is our chief community builder, Kevin Maxwell.
I thought you were going to say landlord or tenant.
No, we're going to leave that one alone, man. Yeah. That's too complicated for me. I like you because you are a community builder.
Thanks, buddy.
In many ways, and you've been doing it for years.
So good to see you.
Good to see you too, man. We got a great guest today. He's a community builder also, particularly in Scottsdale. He's got deep roots in Scottsdale. And that would be Jon Rosenberg. He's co-founder and managing partner of LevRose Commercial Real Estate. Welcome, Jon.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. LevRose brokers real estate commercial properties, has a strong presence in the city of Scottsdale. In fact, LevRose has handled over 2,500 commercial lease and sales transactions in Scottsdale over the years. Maybe that's even more. That may even be old by now. And a lot of that action has been in downtown Scottsdale. And Jon, you've been living in Scottsdale since 1978.
Yeah, I was very young. We moved out here from New York, came out here sixth grade, and went to high school here, Chaparral High School, and then University of Arizona, and then back up to Scottsdale.
So to say you're plugged into this city would be an understatement, wouldn't it?
You know, if you're from here, I've always felt, or if you've been here a long time, it's a really small city.
It is, right? Yeah. Well, they're talking about Phoenix too. Is the biggest small city or the smallest big city? One or the other. Take your pick, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you've been doing commercial real estate in Arizona for over 30 years, but I really like the story you have about how your firm was founded. Talk a little bit about that. How did that come together?
It was just, kind of fluky stuff. We, when I graduated U of A, came back up here, I had a job with a local firm in Old Town, and I actually got my real estate license while I was in college, so I had a kind of a head up on everybody else that was looking at my age. And I answered an ad in the paper back when you actually looked in the newspaper for jobs.
Remember those days?
And I answered an ad for a company, and they were in Old Town, and it was a small company that was doing a lot of work for the RTC, if you remember the Resolution Trust Corporation back
Savings
then.
and loan fiasco.
Yeah, savings loans, and they were looking for somebody that had their real estate license. So I went and answered the ad, went to there, and I was hired. And during that time in that building in Old Town, I ended up meeting downstairs. There was a mortgage company. I ended up meeting a gentleman named Bob Levine, and we started talking. And he was doing some loans with that mortgage company. And a few years later, we decided to partner up and start LevRose, and Levine and Rosenberg, very original that we were. And
you were one of the original smash ups or the
mashups,
right?
Yeah, we did.
Before it was cool.
It was everybody. We were trendsetters for sure. So anyway, we started the company back then, and I was 25 years old, and the irony is, fast forward through all the iterations and all the downturns and all the craziness that went on. Our office today is in that very same building. We now own that building, and we occupy the majority of that property, all of the downstairs, part of the upstairs, and then we also have the adjacent property where we have our property management company, which we started 15 years ago, called Mode Commercial, and Mode manages office, industrial, retail, medical properties around the valley. So we kind of have, both of our businesses within, not even a stone's throw it. We just walk right over back and forth.
And they're both in downtown Scottsdale, right?
They're both, right around the corner from here, in Old Town, Yeah,
that's fantastic, yeah. So how is your business? Talk a little bit about your business today. How many people work for you, and a little bit about how the market is right now?
Sure. So right now, I think we have about 35 agents, commercial agents, all commercial. And then we, support staff. We probably got about a little over 40 people on the LevRose side, and then the Mode side, I think there's about 25 people.
Wow.
So we have a good amount of people, and we've really built a really good group that really stuck together for a long time. We're really fortunate. We've got our longest employees about celebrated 25th anniversary with us.
Wow, so, fantastic.
I don't know how she put up with us for all these years, but she does, and she knows where all the bodies are buried, so it's probably a good thing.
Hang on to her.
Yes, exactly.
Keep her happy.
Yeah, exactly. So LevRose, we started 30 years ago. We just actually had our 30th anniversary of that company, and did a pretty fun celebration at our offices, and it was just great. And one of the things that we touched on, you mentioned the 2,500 leases and transactions and sales in Scottsdale, and it's obviously more than that right now. And it was a little bit of an estimate, but we figured we had done over 7,000 transactions during those years, and what we were talking about is, it's those transactions when someone buys a building or sells a building, or or they have a business and they lease a space. It's a big deal for them. It's a really big deal. I was that same person, right? Many times.
Yeah.
And it's a big deal. So we get to be, I remember saying during that, our 30th anniversary, I was given a toast, and I remember saying, we got to be a part of 7,000 stories, because there's so many different stories, and it was really, just really cool. And the people we've gotten to meet over the years and gotten to know, and really just kind of sharing some of the big points in their business careers, and their buildings could be some of their biggest investments, if not the biggest investment that they have.
That's really good. So talk about some of those stories. You bring up the stories. What are some of your favorite stories that you remember, and some of the most impactful things that stick with you?
I mean, there's so many that they mesh together as to specific ones, but one that I know that a lot of people, especially in real estate, would probably resonate with is Bill Gray, who was the guy who was the founder of the Arizona School of Real Estate and Business.
Sure.
He's like a legend in real estate, right?
Yeah.
I remember Bill coming to me one time just asking for guidance on some of his properties, because he had this whole area, which is now Museum Square. And he came to me and he just said, I just need some help on some comps, and I'm looking at acquiring more space and blah, blah, blah. And I would just help him, because it's Bill Gray, right? I'm like, hey, Bill, whatever you need, I'm happy to help. You're the guy that taught me my, whatever
He's
I
the man.
learned. Yeah. So we would do that. And then he'd ask me again and then he calls me up one day. He goes, thanks for all the hard work. I'm going to sell the school, and I want you to sell the building. And then I want you to sell the other building, and I want you to sell the parking lot that goes across. So we, it was really turnabout, and he just wanted as gratitude for the help I gave him, and we ended up selling all those properties, which is now the gentleman who put the hotel there, and where the parking lot was, and the Arizona School was, the Canopy, I think it's called, and then Museum Square, where all the other items are. And then we of course represented the school as they relocated their space. So it was just kind of a fun thing to be as the kid that went to that school, to be able to at the end be the one that got to sell that school and sell the property.
That's a good story.
And
That is,
Yeah.
But what I find fascinating, real estate to Arizona is the same thing as like oil is to Texas.
Right.
That's where all the investment's been. It's been that way for 50 years. And to be right in the middle of everything has got to be super exciting.
Yeah.
You've ridden a lot of cycles out, haven't you?
Yeah, we've had a few. I mean, I started in a down cycle, right? I mean, I mentioned the RTC days, which is when things were as bad as they could.
Charlie Keating days. Remember those days?
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
And I didn't really understand all of that. I was really just getting my feet wet, and I was a kid that was, worked for a company, and he said, "There's a building, lease it or sell it. There's a space, there's a property, manage it." And I was doing everything. I was acting as a court-appointed receiver. I was acting as the leasing agent, the sales, whatever it was, and we were handling fourplexes, eightplexes, multifamily, mini storage. I sold the mini storage, but I didn't know anything about mini storage. Industrial, automotive, stuff in Tucson, Phoenix, Casa Grande. I mean, it was just all over. So I got a real quick education. I was drinking water out of a fire hose for the first few years. So when I started LevRose, I in just the few years that I was before that, I probably got 10 years worth of education. I felt. It made it a lot easier.
Back in the RTC giveaway days, right?
Yeah.
Remember how controversial that was, coming off the savings and loan with Charlie Keating and the downfall of all that? We were ground zero for all of that, right?
A lot of people made a lot of money.
A lot of people lost a lot of money.
A lot of people lost a lot of money.
So
they gave it to the people that made it.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So what about the state of the market now? Kevin was talking before about trying to get a handle on what the market looks like, and where are things now, and maybe talk about the Valley and where you do a lot of your business. But then we want to zero back down in Scottsdale in just a little bit. But how are things in the market right now?
Surprisingly resilient. Something that I like to remind people is that real estate is local. And when we read these things, or you see them on the talk shows and whatever, they talk about the real estate market and the interest rates. And again, I'm separating commercial from residential, because I'm only focusing on the commercial side, and that's what we do. But Yeah, I mean, interest rates have obviously risen, which has been a challenge for people if their properties are coming, their loans are coming due, and they have to refi. We have always been, our company has been very focused over the years, more on leasing than sales. So probably 60 to 70% leasing and 30 to 40% sales. How's my math? Was it good? No.
Close enough.
Close.
It works for me.
Right. So anyway, so that lane was kind of where we were always kind of, a little bit smaller space, under 10,000 square feet was kind of our sweet spot as a company. And there's the big firms. There's all these international, national firms, and while we transact with them quite a bit, we don't necessarily go head to head with them and go for these big high rises downtown. So while they were focused on a lot of those and the big investment and the big, huge, sales or whatever to investors and REITs and things like that, we kind of always swam in a little bit different lane. And our lane's been still really strong. There's a lot of activity, as we know. People are continuing to move here.
Yep.
They move here. They bring their business here. If they bring their business here, they need a space. And a lot of what we're seeing in a lot of the office, for example, is there's definitely been a change since COVID, work from home, and what that's created is a downsizing of those offices, so that 50,000 square foot tenant may want to be 25, and the 25 may want to be 10, and 10 may want to be 5, and 5 may want to go to 2,500 or 3. So that means the 2,500s are getting filled up, the 5s are getting filled up, and so on. And that's our sweet spot. So we're slammed.
Yeah.
And what we're finding is, if you can accommodate that, it's super busy. And the retail market, pretty much the same right now. There's a lot. It's really hard to find small retail space, especially if it's restaurant spaces are impossible to find. Drive-throughs are hard to find. Experiential's big right now. And then industrial. I know Kevin and I were talking briefly about industrial before, and the air park is super tight. I mean, there's not a lot of space.
Right.
So, this is, and they're not there. While there's some developments in queue, there's not so much coming on that it's going to free up anytime soon.
Yeah. Kevin, let's focus on Scottsdale a little bit. Maybe get into what the situation looks like in Scottsdale. Jon, let's talk about downtown Scottsdale first. Your office is there. You've been there for a long, long, long time, and you've got your imprints on downtown Scottsdale as well with a lot of the work that you've done there. What's your feelings about the state of downtown Scottsdale right now as it relates to your business?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, Old Town, downtown Old Town is somewhat interchangeable and depending on how they refer to it. But South Scottsdale and then sort of Old Town when you get closer. But it's very strong. Obviously, there is a little bit of there's a couple big buildings, Galleria, for example, that are going to have some vacancies right now because they are a victim of COVID. And the downsizing of those call centers and things like that.
Yelp particularly, right?
Yelp in particular. And they've got some other big tenants like Indeed and Zillow and things like that. Yeah. So I think, those types of properties are going to go through a transition and going to have to downsize, maybe shrink up the spaces a little bit and then they'll refill. But there's more coming. There's some really cool stuff coming with new hotels. The Caesars Hotel looks like that's going to be awesome.
Can't wait to see that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I had breakfast with Joe the other day and he's super pumped about it and just looks like it's going to be, amazing.
We got to get a tour over there, Kevin, sometime soon. Joe will do that for us. So just to ask him. Yeah.
We've had Joe on the show before, and then we had Kate and Andrew on.
Yeah. They were talking about it too from Mace Rich. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
It's great. And, so there's a lot going on. And then you've got there's a bunch of projects going up and down Camelback and not a bunch, but there's some that, they've been queued for a while. So they're finally some of them are starting to take fold. Of course, I think they're probably a little slower because obviously construction costs have gone up and everything takes longer now. But, but anyway, but the area, as far as downtown is still, highly desirable. People want to be there. It's a great place. I know firsthand from a place to have an office, there's nowhere I'd rather be.
Right.
can go to. I literally, as I was leaving to come over here, I watched 3 people from our marketing team walk out the office. They were walking down to this little convenience place that's, a block away. And in the morning I see them walking for coffee and, and you could go to lunch, and some people, and actually we have some people in our office that live in some of the apartments right there. So it's just such a great place to be, and for so many reasons.
Yeah. How, do you guys do a lot of business in Tempe?
Yeah, we do. We do some Tempe, sure.
Because it seems like now I'm thinking about it, you've been pointing out these distinguishing things. I'm thinking that Tempe has a lot more large office buildings than we do. And you're right. I didn't realize how boutique we kind of are as far as, we have some large employers here, but we don't have any of those big, massive, huge buildings that have 1 or 2 employers in them, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of been a benefit for us probably, huh?
It is. It's funny what people think is a detriment over time turns out to be the benefit, right? If you, just like with anything, right? If you keep the same clothes long enough, they come back in style. Yeah,
I'm a living testament to that.
So yeah, I mean, some of those buildings are losing some major.
So Tempe's in a much different situation than we are. Is that right?
Especially along Tempe Town Lake, there's going to be some big challenges.
Yeah, because I'm a victim of one of those. I mean, I used to have a job office on Tempe Town Lake, one of those big, huge, shiny glass buildings.
Right.
And I was only there for 6 months, and they came to us and said, go home.
Work at home.
And I've been home ever since.
That's kind of nice, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
nice for you, but not nice for the market, right?
It's good and bad, right? But I was in one of those big, huge buildings around Tempe Town Lake. So we don't have any of that really, do we?
Not really. We have a few.
But you mentioned like the Galleria,
Galleria is one that comes to mind. Obviously, you've got the tower building in front of Fashion Square. And then there's some new projects up north, the new ones along 101 and things like that. So there are some, but you're right. I mean, nothing to anywhere near the scale of what Tempe has had and what they're going to be dealing with.
You mentioned earlier that real estate still, a restaurant space is still desirable.
Yeah. Restaurants are kind of the new anchors in a lot of ways.
Are they really?
Yeah. people want to be around restaurants. Grocery stores, well, as we see, they're merging and whatever, and in a lot of ways, and then more boutique-y. But restaurants, people want to be near them.
There's always a big draw. So let's get a little political, and let's talk about Scottsdale in particular. There's ongoing debate about growth, no growth, and how we evolve and change. And sometimes it's a pretty tough road to hoe when you come to the city and trying to get projects approved and continue to look for ways to grow and evolve as a city. You're right in the middle of all that. You're totally active on all fronts in the city. What do you think about where the city is heading?
It's interesting, and I've gotten more involved over the years as I see it. First of all, I'm not a developer. I've never developed anything.
Right.
I mean, aside from hiring someone to dig a pool for me once years ago, that was the extent of my development. So. I first of all, I give a lot of credit to developers that have the courage to put really their entire life savings on the line when they're creating these projects. And I think people forget and miss the point that they are not just coming in. They're not these greedy people that are trying to come in and just build and take money. They're really risking everything.
That's right.
And they've got a vision, and their vision, in many cases, can turn into something great. In some cases, it can turn into something that ends up for them not so great, but we've seen some phenomenal projects over the years get built. So anyway, back to the question. I feel like this whole hands off, no more development, stop, shut the gates, no one else can come here, is going to come back and bite us where in the future.
Economically
right. For sure.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we have low property taxes for a reason.
Yeah.
And, and Scottsdale's a beautiful place to live for a reason. And it's because people want to come here. People want to live here. When my family moved here when I was a kid, we lived in McCormick Ranch. Well, if it were up to the same people that are today saying no more development, there probably wouldn't have been a McCormick Ranch.
That's true.
Right.
And that goes the same for DC Ranch, McDowell Mountain Ranch, Greyhawk, all these places where all these people that say no more development live would not have happened if those same people were here. So there, it's kind of unfair to say no more. So I have a daughter who now lives in Gilbert, because her and her boyfriend, they were looking for houses, and that's where they could afford
Could
to
afford to
really
live.
buy.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so we're quietly going to start losing the future,
Right.
People that are going to move away to other cities. And I think that, be careful what you wish for, and that's what can happen if we're not careful.
Yeah, we were talking on a roundtable today about Scottsdale is the only city in the valley that's actually not growing, population-wise. And the whole valley is exploding in growth. It's been doing that for 50 years, and Scottsdale's stagnant. So it begs the question, and we know a lot of the reasons why, and affordable housing is one, and the anti-development sentiment that makes it so hard to get projects done here is another. So do you think Scottsdale is losing its business edge?
Not yet, but I think we could if we're not careful. If we stop people from coming here, which is what a lot of people are doing, then what are businesses going to do? They're going to look at other cities. So, and then the new businesses coming in that are looking from other cities. There's a mass exodus out of California, and they're coming here in droves, and Washington and places like that. And if they're looking in Metro Phoenix, and Scottsdale says, nah, hands off, or there's nowhere to put them,
Right.
then they're going to go where they can be housed, and how literally and figuratively where can the business be, where can their employees live,
Right.
and if the employees all have to live in faraway cities and commute in, then the businesses need to be where the employee base is. So I think over time, Don, they're going to lose their edge, and Scottsdale will lose the edge because a lot of these big new firms are going to come in and they're going to say, you know what, thanks, but pass.
Right.
Let's just go to another city that's more welcoming and embracing of us.
Kevin and I talk about this all the time. We're going to wake up 5 years from now and say, what the heck happened?
Yeah.
Because the decisions that we are making or not making now, short time frame and with no longer term vision in mind and how these decisions are getting made, it's a little worrisome.
It's very short-sighted.
Yeah.
Very short-sighted.
Let's talk about one of your favorite subjects, and that's parking downtown.
Oh my God, bane of my existence.
So first of all, I'll tee you up with a couple questions so you can set it up a little bit.
Sure.
One, do we have a parking problem in downtown Scottsdale? And if we do, where do we need the parking the most?
So we do, and it kind of shifts a little bit, and it has shifted. And over the years, the city has created some solutions in certain areas. And as development continues and more projects do finally get done, and ones that, like I said, maybe have been in queue for a while, or new things are added, we need to keep up with that. So is there a problem? I think certain times of day, there's a major problem. I think certain quadrants of downtown, certain times of day, there's a problem. And, and they've built a lot of parking structures in certain areas. I happen to own several properties in Old Town, and they're in different areas. They're got one on Main Street, one Brown, one on Winfield, and a few others over in what's called the entertainment district. And what we're finding is that particularly the entertainment district, which I don't even know if should really be called the entertainment district, because the reality is, what is there, 168 hours in a week, and I think it's entertainment 8 hours a week.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's
Good
like,
point.
4 hours on Friday, 4 or 5 hours on Friday and Saturday, whatever
right.
it is.
Yep.
And the rest of the time, there's residents that live there. There are hundreds of businesses that are there, and employees like my own. There are retailers, there's salons, there's all these different things, there's hotels, all these different things going on, and they call it the entertainment district. So that being said, there's this narrative out there that area, it's all the bars, and stay away, it's the bars. But what's happened over the years is, especially when buildings like the Galleria were full pre-COVID, and it's going to fill up again. I mean, we're not talking dead in the water properties. Right. The particular area of the entertainment district was developed around a shortfall of parking. So in the 80s, what had happened was, and I did some research and I found this out, and fortunately, it was shared, and the city completely agrees with that. People at the city, they had a whole bunch of postage stamp lots that could never be developed. And the reason they couldn't be developed is that they didn't have the parking. So like 1982, 83, something like that, the city agreed to say, okay, you can develop these lots, whoever wants them, sell them off. There was a developer that came to them that wanted to buy some, and he had some others, and they started selling them off. And instead of your parking requirements being X, meaning you build this 8,000 square foot building and you need 27 parking spaces, we're going to allow the street parking to count towards your requirements. So, and I use that as an example because I'm in a building that's 8,500 square feet by law, or whatever you want to call it, by the zoning. Theoretically, if they were building that today, and this is back when they built it back then, the same thing, it was supposed to have like 27 parking spaces, we'll say, and it has 12 because the other 15 are on the street. And so those street parking spaces are shared by all these buildings. So that whole area was developed with a shortfall.
Right.
So from day one, it was built with a shortfall. So now you start that.
So I'm sorry. So those 15 parking spaces that you're counting as being good for you are also being shared by other businesses.
Everybody.
15.
It's open. Well, there's street parking, and there was at the time enough out there that it was fine. Everyone could park. Everyone was happy, come and go, whatever it is. And it's city parking. So, and that's worked fine. Well, then as the area started developing more, and then it kind of came to a head at where it really started to become a tipping point was when the Galleria started filling up with those tenants that we referenced
like
earlier.
Yelp, right? Exactly.
Yeah, like Yelp, which had hundreds and hundreds of employees.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden, you had a situation in particular with Galleria where you had over 3,000 employees working out of a building that had 1,900 parking spaces up for that building, because that building was built separately from this and was built to park as a retail center, because that's originally what it was.
That's right.
So those 1,000 people now dribble out on the street, and now all of a sudden, all this shortfall parking, that 15 spaces that we're talking about, and take that times every other building in the area, was gone. Right? Gone. So we went to the city, and the city agreed to, use permit parking and things like that, and make it easier, and it resolved the issue temporarily. At that point, I think it was 2015, they did a parking study, and they brought this company in, and I actually was interviewed by the company a couple times while they were doing it. And the data was very clear. The data said there's a shortfall in certain areas, certain times a day, but this particular district and quadrant, they called it was quadrant 2, is at almost at capacity during the day, not at night. Then I just want to clarify that too. Forget about the bars for a minute. The people that go to the bars, my kids go to the bars, they Uber.
Right.
They better Uber.
I hope so. Right. Yeah.
It's the nighttime is not the issue. The nighttime people figure it out.
People forget about that.
Yeah, exactly. The daytime's the issue. You've got all the residents, and then they eventually. So they said no more future development. This area cannot withstand a big influx without additional parking. So what's happened since 2015? Well, the Stetson apartments were built, 300 plus units. The Envy condos were built, 90 units. You've got the Senna House Hotel was just built. The Maya Hotel is being built. You've got the Miller Apartments that are getting ready to break ground. You've got the project on Scottsdale Road, which is called the Marquee, which is I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of square feet. And then you've got that whole line of buildings that are going to get developed and redeveloped along Camelback.
Huge project.
Yeah, from Scottsdale and Camelback, along Camelback, going east all the way to Civic Center. So, that has nothing to do with the buildings there that are 50, 60 years old that need to be updated at some point. Some of the ones that are 40 years old need to be updated, that can't go up because there's not enough parking. So anyway, long story, but at the end of the day, what's happened since 2015, these last 8 years, and what's continuing to now break ground and continue in queue, is going to be a bigger problem. And so that's why I'm a big proponent that there was a bond, 2019, and the bond said, build a structure in Old Town where it's needed most. And that's where it's needed most.
Good point. That's going to be a big issue for City Council coming up in the next year, right?
Yeah.
As they figure that out. So, did you ever think about running for politics? Get into politics,
Not a
running for
chance.
council?
Not a chance. I let this guy do it over here.
Kevin likes that stuff.
Yeah.
John, what do you do for fun?
It sounds like I work all the time.
So sure does.
Yeah. I mean, I love being outdoors. I spend a lot of my summer in San Diego, and I love, running, exercise, going to the gym.
Yeah.
My wife's gotten into pickleball.
Oh my gosh, pickleball crazy.
Yeah, so she's been
dragging you to that?
She's been dragging me to that until I kind of hurt my shoulder. So I'm kind of
no
working
injury,
on that.
man. They're starting to come on, right?
I'll tell you what, the orthopedic surgeons are making a mint off. I think they created pickleball. But so just that. Anything. I read a lot. So try not to sit still.
Yeah, good. I never see you sitting still. That's for darn sure. Kevin, you got a Scottsdale Analytics for us today, right?
I just want to bring Jon in on a little bit here because
sure.
I was interested. I was thinking about today. I went on the True Scottsdale website, which is the economic development website, and I got some numbers about commercial space. And it kind of tells a story that it kind of backs up what Jon was talking about in the fact that, we hear all these news stories about these vacant office buildings, and commercial real estate is in really bad trouble, but he's saying there's not so much. And when I'm looking at this, I'm seeing this. Look, so this came out again. This came off CoStar, July 2023 is the source for this, but it's off the city's website. Talking about employment centers. So Air Park Industrial looks like a 3.1% vacancy. That seems pretty low.
Yeah, but that's pretty accurate. It's not.
Is it?
Well, they're not building a lot more at this point. So it's filling up, and industrial is really, really tight.
Air Park office, 15.7%. Sound about right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
That's about accurate. And the Air Park, by the way, just so you know, from CoStar's perspective, that reaches outside of we think of the Air Park as this little, quadrant, I guess,
right?
Where the planes come and go. But the reality is, from CoStar's perspective, Air Park reaches all the way, I think, to the 101 Raintree area.
Okay.
So you've got some new projects that have gone up there.
Yeah,
right. Downtown office, 16.1% vacancy.
Yeah, and again, that Galleria is
the Galleria is going to be the one
piece of that.
That's right.
Driving that.
Yeah.
McDowell office, 26.2%.
Yeah, so there's that big project. Okay, the name escapes me real quick, but there's that project near 64th. Entrada. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was, especially in July, I think that was almost fully vacant.
Is that right?
So yes.
Where are they at on that? Is that done yet? It seems like they're still building.
It's done. The office, they've signed some tenants, so I think it's slowly starting to fill up, and I think some of the other things around that, and that's another really, really good point. If you build the right projects over time, not only will they fill, but you've got the ancillary thing. It's going to help the residences because now they have a place to go to. There's some retail in there. There's I noticed new cool looking coffee place in there, drive through, and I guess there's a million coffee places.
That's pretty cool.
People like their coffee.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So so that's the analytics. So
Good stuff.
Good stuff.
Great, always getting a chance to get the lowdown on what's happening in our city, and we certainly got that today from Jon Rosenberg. Jon, thank you so much for your professional and your personal passion and your commitment to the city. We really appreciate it. We need more people like you out there, man. That's for sure, but we sure appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for listening. We'll see you next week for another edition of Today and Tomorrow in Scottsdale.